Today, we examine a book of Toltec wisdom called The Four Agreements. The Toltec were a group of artists and scientists that created a society thousands of years ago in southern Mexico. They explored and conserved the spiritual knowledge of the ancient ones by passing that knowledge down through generations of masters. Don Miguel Ruiz is one of these masters, and with these four agreements, he shares what he calls the art of transformation, which moves us from living in states of mind that are hell on earth to creating and living in a state of mind called heaven on earth. As an introduction and background, Ruiz says, and I quote, "To be alive is the biggest fear that humans have. Death is not the biggest fear we have. Our biggest fear is taking the risk to be alive and express what we really are. We have learned to live our lives trying to satisfy other people's demands. We have learned to live by other people's points of view because of the fear of not being accepted and of not being good enough." End quote. That's a pretty remarkable statement, that we are driven by fear. Where does this fear come from? Well, according to Ruiz, when we were children, we were taught how to behave, and we were told what is important, but we were never given the opportunity to choose our own beliefs. Using reward and punishment, we were domesticated as children in much the same way as we would train a pet. Isn't that a lovely picture? I always said I was going to come back as a cat. Maybe I already have. But if we think about it, taking the pet analogy out, it is true that as children, we want the reward of positive attention. And we fear the punishment that comes when we get the message of not being good enough. To avoid the pain of ostracism and rejection, we pretend then to be what we are not, just so that we can please our elders, our teachers, our parents, our ministers, sometimes our friends. Over time, we play the role so well that we forget who we are, and we assimilate into the belief system, the dream, as he calls it, of the planet. In effect, as children, we make agreements about how we should live, what we should value, and what behaviors are acceptable. Then we learn to judge and punish others and ourselves according to how well we conform with these standards. If we don't conform, we're bad. If we do conform, we're good. If they don't conform, they're bad. If they do conform, they're good. Now, at some level, though, we know that the image we project is not really who we are. And we know that we will never fit that image of perfection that we've been told we need to be. And so we reject ourselves, become self-abusive with our self-talk. We judge others with our own image of what perfection should look like, and they too, inevitably, will fall short of our perfect expectation. When we fail to meet the standards of our inner judge, then we feel shame. We feel that we don't deserve happiness, and so we become a victim. The victim within us receives that not enough message. It carries the naming, blaming, and shaming that our inner judge tells us we are. And so for many of us, the judge and the victim control our beliefs and control our lives. Ruiz says, the judge decrees and the victim suffers the guilt and punishment, often over and over again for the same crime. Now I know this sounds awfully negative. I promise we will move to something funner. But I need to send a picture of what the overall background of this book is and the premise of it is. As a result, many of us believe that it is normal for us to suffer, that it is normal to suffer, to live in fear, in emotional pain, and in drama. In other words, the Toltec believe that we have come to believe it is normal to live in hell. But is it possible to live in a pleasant dream of the planet? Is it possible to live in heaven on earth instead of hell? Absolutely. But it's scary. When we want to shift, when we hear that still small voice in the back of our minds that says, you can believe something differently, we feel uncomfortable. We feel it in our bellies, in our solar plexus, in our throats. It feels unsafe. Rather than face our fear, many of us choose to stay right where we are. Better the devil we know than the devil we don't. It takes true courage and determination to take back our personal power and break the agreements that we made when we were young and replace them with new ones. Ruiz offers 4 powerful agreements that will start us on the way to living lives of joy and fulfillment, to living lives of heaven on earth. Mastering these agreements will free us with more personal power, so we'll be able to change our entire system of thousands of agreements that we have made. But they start with these 4. The first agreement is, be impeccable with your word. Has anyone ever noticed how what one person says can change your day completely in an instant? This first agreement, be impeccable with your word, is the most difficult to master. It is the agreement from which all the other agreements flow, and it is challenging because words are what we use to define our world. They have energy. They have the power to create or to destroy. Why choose the word impeccable? Impeccable means without sin. And Ruiz defines sin as anything that goes against ourselves. When we speak words of judgment, of blame, of shame to ourselves, when we label ourselves, we are going against ourselves, and therefore we are not being impeccable with our word. When we speak words of judgment, when we name, blame, or shame others, we hear those words too. And so we go against ourselves and are not impeccable with our word when we speak those words to others. Once spoken, words cannot be unspoken. Once heard, they cannot be unheard. And even when we don't agree with what we are hearing, we still hear. They affect our thoughts, and we know that words become thoughts, thoughts become things. Words create our world. Let me give you an example about the power of words. In 1964, a study was done by Harvard professor Robert Rosenthal. He took a standard IQ test, just a basic IQ test, labeled it something fancy, the Harvard test of inflected acquisition. Say that 3 times quickly. And he took it into an elementary school in San Francisco. The teachers were told that Harvard had created this very special test that could predict which students were about to experience a dramatic growth in their IQ. The researchers then conducted this standard test with the fake label, randomly picked a few names from each classroom, gave the teachers the names of these children with the message that these children were poised for intellectual growth, and they went away. Came back at the end of the school year for 2 years following. Guess what? The children who were expected to have great gains gained greatly. Why? Because the teachers expected more from them, spent more time encouraging them, gave them more attention. In a sense, the teachers had made a mental decision, an agreement, if you will, that these children were special. The children heard the words, they internalized them, they agreed to them, and rose to the level of the teacher's expectation. With their own internally spoken word, they responded, because that's what children do. This leads naturally to the question, what words were we told that we have come to believe are true for ourselves? We may have been told that we're too fat, too skinny, the wrong color, stupid, smart, pretty, ugly, singer, non-singer. Big boys don't cry, good girls don't get angry, kiss and make up. We should be more athletic, blah, blah, blah. All messages coming at us and bombarding us as we are impressionable. It's hard to remember that those were other people's opinions. And as you know, opinions are like belly buttons. Everybody's got them. Insert your own body part, I don't care. But opinions are subjective, they can change, just like these teachers' opinions can change. But we might have heard those opinions as truths. And when we believed them, they became something we agreed to. And with this first agreement, be impeccable with your word. We are invited to challenge whether the agreements that we made as children are still true for us today. Do they serve us now? Can we make new agreements that are impeccable, that are for us, by releasing these old beliefs about ourselves? With new awareness, we can speak to ourselves differently. We can reflect on the stories we've believed, hold them up to the light of our own internal bull detector, and choose not to agree if the words do not reflect our truth. This gives us back the power that we gave away when we agreed to the false labeling. It gives us immunity against the poison of gossip. It gives us immunity over other people shooting on us. It gives us the paper to say, the power to say, that's who I was, not who I am. No, your opinion of me is none of my business. I like who I am. We don't need to believe everything we hear. So what do we replace these agreements with? We speak and create impeccably. What does that look like? In James chapter 3, we are told, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come both praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be so. If we are impeccable with our word, we will speak and think words that add to life, words of love, of beauty, words that create heaven on earth, rather than words of anger, of complaint, of blame, jealousy, and revenge. And a simple test is this: does our speech add or take away from joy? When we complain, when we are moody, when we are ungracious or ungrateful, are we adding to life? Much of our speech is habit. We naturally grumble. We grumble about the weather, about the price of oil, about politics, about our size, about we don't have any clothes to wear, about getting up in the morning. And we do it all the time. Possibly the worst damage we do, though, is how we speak to ourselves. I have a habit of saying dummy to myself. I have a habit of saying I was stupid to myself. Do I believe those words? Yeah, sometimes I really do. Are they kind? No. Do they add to life? No. Are they impeccable? No. But it's a hard habit to break. Think of the damage that words have done. Think of the inspiration that words have created. If we want to add to life on this planet, to love on this planet, then I believe we have an obligation. We have an obligation to manage the creative power of our word and to speak words that are kind, patient, encouraging, and loving. We have an obligation to limit our complaining, to refrain from gossip, to stop focusing on the negative. Let us, as Paul says, think on that which is lovely, and speak only words that are positive. If in doubt, we can always follow the advice of Thumper in Bambi. If we can't say anything nice, then let's just not say anything at all. So, first agreement, be impeccable with our word. The second agreement, don't take anything personally. The underlying message of this agreement is, nothing other people do to us is because of us. If we can separate ourselves from the hurt of another person's anger, betrayal, or violence, we might be able to see that the other person is dealing with his or her own beliefs, feelings, and opinions, and the poison that they are spreading is their own. It is a reflection of their own worldview. And when we bite the hook and take things personally, we feel the need to respond. We either defend ourselves or we attack. We need to be right. We need to assert our position. We need to let the other person know they are wrong. Or at the very least, we need to feel that we have shared our opinion. But really, why bother? Why bother? Why do we need to participate in somebody else's drama? If we know who we really are, what does it matter if someone else has a different opinion from us? It is difficult to remember that when we've been hurt by someone else, that it is their issue, not ours. Remember, nothing other people do to us is because of us. Now that doesn't mean that we need to remain in a hell-like situation. Instead, we can choose to remove ourselves without becoming emotionally triggered, and this grants us the gift of this agreement, which is, quoting, immunity to poison in the middle of hell. We can take control of our actions rather than insisting that the other person change. We can make choices based on our needs, not on what others do or say. We can let them be who they are, where they are. We can ask for what we want, and if they're unwilling or unable to deliver it, we can choose to walk away. No hard feelings, with our integrity intact. Now I can almost hear the yeah buts. Yeah, but she betrayed me. Yeah, but he stole from me. Yeah, but how can I not take it personally? They deserve to be spanked. Difficult for sure. Different parts of our minds, including the yeah buts, all speak at once, each with a different point of view and each representing an agreement that we have made. We can become so overwhelmed with all of these voices in our heads that sometimes we hardly know what we want anymore. We become so conflicted because one part of us wants to do that unity thing of love and acceptance, and then the other part of us wants to do the let's go get him. And there's another part of us that wants to just roll over and go away and hide in a corner. They're all real. They're all agreements we've made. I hope I'm not alone in this.
Don't take it personally.
I'll try not to take it personally. How do we make sense of it all? How do we make sense of it? It may be helpful. I found this helpful to think of it this way. If a person steals our money, they may die richer. If they take our job, they may feel momentarily like they have won. But if they steal our integrity, they will not have won anything. They will not have gained more integrity. If they steal our joy, they will not be more joyful, because our joy and our integrity can never be taken from us. We can sacrifice our joy and integrity by taking things too personally. when someone hurts us, we give them too much of our power if we let them steal our birthright too. Tune out the voices that demand justice, that demand payback. Don't take anything personally. Let them go. If it wasn't you, it would have been someone else. Keep your integrity, keep our power, we keep our joy. Let them have all that other stuff. The third agreement is don't make assumptions. We make assumptions all the time without even realizing that we're making them. I remember a few years back, I made a date to meet my son David at Costco after work. I had this perfectly clear vision in my mind that I was going to the Costco at Stadium SkyTrain Station. He had an equally clear vision in his mind that he was going to the Costco in Bridgeport SkyTrain Station. And so we both wandered around Costco, completely in clear assumption that we were doing the right thing, for about half an hour before I realized what had happened. And of course, the one time I forget my phone, right? 2 words, at Bridgeport, would have saved so much confusion and emotional energy. We were both right. Nobody was wrong. But it's always stuck in my mind how something so emotionally charged could have been avoided so easily. When we make assumptions, we assign meanings to other people's words or actions. We assign meanings to other people's words and actions. Then we take them personally. Then we get upset. Then we worry. Then we may retaliate, or we may start thinking negative things about the other, or react emotionally in some other way, only to find out eventually that those assumptions were false. What a waste of energy. We create stories that have no basis in reality. For example, how many of us assume that our partners should know what we think and what we want? We think, well, if he loves me, he'll know this about me, and so he'll insert action here. And of course, when the poor guy fails because he doesn't deliver what we expect, we feel hurt. We make them feel guilty. We start thinking of all the things else that they've done wrong. You should have known. Eventually leading to, well, maybe you're not the right person for me after all. And all the poor guy did was not do something he didn't know anything about. We can choose to clarify more. We're not clairvoyant. They say that nature abhors a vacuum, and if we don't have all the information we need, we know that we will fill in the details with all kinds of stuff. Why don't we ask more? Because we've told ourselves that asking for clarification makes us look incompetent. And we don't want to look incompetent. We've all been in the classroom when the teacher says, does anyone have any questions? And nobody puts their hands up. And chances are pretty good that nobody understands. Everybody's lost. It takes courage. It takes courage to bare your soul and say, tell me what you need. We don't want to admit how much we don't know. We've told ourselves that false story that if you love me, you should know. Let's challenge the stories that we make up, and we make them up all the time. Here's some common assumptions that just popped into my head as I was writing this. My love will change them. No. Another one. If I model it, they'll follow my example. Didn't work with my kids, hasn't worked with Walt. And, you know, I'm the only one who doesn't understand the answer. No. Let us ask the questions. Let us risk the other person labeling us unworthy. Let us risk the other person saying no. If they say no, we don't need to believe that it means that we're not worthy of a yes. It simply means that they are in integrity enough to say that it's something they don't want to do. Accepting a no does not mean you don't deserve yes. So, if somebody does say no, we can choose to go to number 2. Don't take it personally. We can clarify and then decide what to do. We can do it ourselves, we can choose to change our mind, let it go. We can decide to go by ourselves, whatever it might be. Depending on how much the issue means to us, we may say, okay, this is not for me anymore, I choose to do something different. The third agreement, don't make assumptions, is all about effective communication. It is about recognizing that we each have a right to our needs and wants, and being willing to accept that others have different needs than we do. Each of us is entitled to what we want. By opening this discussion and speaking from our truth, we can have a clear opening about whether or not we're willing to continue with the relationship, whether we're willing to make a compromise, whether or not we're truly understanding what we each want. And so, the fourth agreement, my favorite agreement, it's the agreement that makes the other seem so much easier. It's about how we act on those first 3 agreements. And it is, always do your best. Think of a baby who is learning to walk. As they take their first tentative steps, we can tell that they're a little shaky, but they're determined and they are trying. We know that they will fall, and we don't hold it against them. The child doesn't hold his own failure against himself either. The child doesn't throw up his hands and say, can't do it. Never going to walk, going right back to that four crawling thing. We understand, and the child instinctively understands, that it will take practice to evolve into a new ability. We will fall and get up, fall again, until we have learned a new habit. We understand that it takes time. The fourth agreement suggests that we cut ourselves some slack. We have years of domestication, training, and habits to overcome. Lots of accompanying, underlying fear. All that we can expect of ourselves is that we do our best with the resources that we have at the moment. Our best can be variable. It'll be different today than it was yesterday. It might be different in the morning than it is in the afternoon. It'll be different if you're tired versus if we're refreshed, if we're sick versus if we're healthy. But in time and with practice, our best will be better than our best used to be. Ruiz makes one other interesting point, which spoke to me, and it's about not overdoing. Sometimes we push ourselves to do too much. We waste our energy and become ineffective as we tire ourselves out. In doing so, we go against ourselves. Therefore, we're breaking our first agreement. We are not being impeccable with ourselves. When we do our best, we can stand in integrity. We don't need to judge ourselves. There is no need for regret, no need for recrimination, for guilt, for remorse, or for self-punishment. We can stand tall. With freedom and forgiveness, we can truly say these 4 words. I did my best. We would be doing ourselves a disservice and an unkindness if we expect to change overnight. Doing our best is enough. Let us treat ourselves with compassion and accept ourselves right where we are. We may look back at some of the things we've done in the past and cringe. But we were doing our best. Let's give ourselves a break. These, then, are the tools that we can use to transform our lives from a mindset of living in pain, in suffering, and anger, and shift and transform into lives that are life-affirming and joyful and abundant. We will fall, and like those children, we can pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and start all over again. It's never too late. When we learn to add to life by speaking words that are only positive, when we release our need to be accepted and stop taking things personally, we let others be. We have the courage to ask questions rather than make assumptions. When we do our very best, we honor and love ourselves and others. We are, each of us, holy. We are enough. We need no acceptance from anyone else because we are already worthy. We are each special, precious, intrinsically deserving of good, of joy, of love, and of peace. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take things personally. Don't make assumptions. And always do your best. God bless you.